Hello friends, and welcome back to our homestead. Today I'm going to be harvesting some of my red raspberry leaves to make homemade tea and homemade remedy. See, we are surrounded by natural herbs and plants and bushes and trees. We just need to tap into their potential and what it means to our health. So today I'm going to be harvesting a bunch of my beautiful, they're right behind me, red raspberry leaves, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to be preparing those leaves to make delicious, very fragrant, dark, rich tea. I'm going to attempt to collect only some of the leaves. I don't want to take all of them, and I'm going to go for the young leaves. I don't want to take anything that of old growth. So like for example, here I see a branch of very young light green color leaves, and that's what I want, and that's what I'm going to be collecting. It's a little windy today, so it is a good time to collect these leaves in the spring. But what was happening in the spring is I had this young deer who kept coming into my yard, and every night she was nibbling on my raspberries, and I had literally almost nothing for growth this spring. So I had to wait for it to grow back out. As soon as it grew back out, the young deer came back and she nibbled again and she ate everything. So I just need a small pile. I don't need too much. Okay. And as you can see, it has a lot of unripened, and I have some ripened raspberries here, and those are wonderful, and I'm going to be harvesting those as well. It's the second harvest of the year. I'm super excited about that. All right friends, so here are my red raspberry leaves, and I picked the new growth because that's what's best. Oh, don't mind the dog. Cats and dogs forever war. So it is best to be picked in the spring, but as you heard my story, I had this deer who kept coming in almost every night and eating them. As soon as they would grow out, she would eat them. So now finally I have a nice pile that I picked here. Okay, and like I said, I went for the young ones, for the new growth. And I need to preserve them, and I'm gonna do it in two ways, okay? One, I'm gonna make a small amount of tincture. I'm gonna just make a small one. And the other one, I'm gonna be making tea out of it. But please stay for the whole video, because I'm gonna show you how I make this very rich, deep color, fragrant tea, not just dried. There's another trick to it. So what is red raspberry leaves good for? Well, growing up, I know that when anybody who was sick, right away mama would make tea, and she would make tea and she would put a couple of teaspoons of raspberry jam in it, because that was supposed to be good to fight the flu, to fight the cold, and to fight the fevers. Okay, so that was added right away. But you know what though? I don't think my mama really knew why it was used. But now I know that raspberries and raspberry leaves are filled with good antioxidant nutrients that are so important. So I am looking at this book here, and I'll share with you guys this book. I really like this author. She's really amazing. All right, so this book here I'm looking at, and it's called Grow Your Herbal Remedies by Maria Noel Groves. She is phenomenal. She offers, I'm not sponsored by her, but I really love her. She offers herbal classes, and I know she speaks at conferences, and that's how I met her. I met her at a herbal conference, and I bought her books because they're very easy to follow. There's nothing more annoying than to buy a book and it's not interesting to read. Her books are very interesting to read. So what I'm doing right now, first of all, I did not wash them. Okay, I did not wash them, and I'm gonna explain to you why I don't wash my herbs that grow high above the ground. Those that are growing on the ground, like plantain, for example, I wash because it's on the road, meaning like it's on the ground. Whereas raspberry leaves, they're high off the ground, and we had monsoon rains for the last couple of days, so they are nicely naturally washed, so I'm not washing them. But I do pick them in a dry weather. It's important that they're nice and dry, okay, and they're nice and clean. And I also love to pick all of my herbs from very, very clean herbal spots where I know there haven't been any pesticides, any herbicides, or any other chemical sprayed. All right, so if you are walking down the road and you see wild red raspberry bushes growing, please don't pick those leaves for medicinal use. Please don't. They are not the cleanest place by the road, okay? So please find something where it's nice and clean. So I'm using fresh plant material, okay? I know that there are ways of making tinctures using dried, and the ratio of alcohol to dried material is very different. I'm using fresh. So mine is a folk method, okay? It's a folk method, meaning that I don't weigh anything. So this is not a weigh method. This is pretty much, I am taking my fresh plant material, okay? I am cutting them up in smaller chunks so more surface area is exposed, just like this, all right? I'm putting them in a glass container because I like to work with glass containers, not with plastic, all right? Just like this. And I'm gonna be covering everything with 100 proof vodka. So when it's a fresh plant material, I really like to use fresh vodka. All right, so Mama Lil, you're gonna ask me, what are the benefits, medicinal benefits of red raspberry leaf? So there are many. As a matter of fact, one of the first ones is it's gonna say that it is women's health friend. It's just an ally for women's health. So meaning that besides being very helpful to tone uterine wall, okay, so if a woman is preparing for labor, it's gonna give nice and strong contractions, right, because it's toning the wall. It's gonna help to stop mild bleeding after birth. I remember mild again because, you know, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not prescribing anything here. I'm just sharing some educational information. So besides toning, it's also helpful when during menstruation. It helps as a mild diuretic, and it helps to kind of combat some of that discomfort during menstruation. So that's why it's often said that it is for women's health ally. But besides that, leaves are also very high in vitamin C. They're high in flavonoids, and they're just good for your health as an antioxidant, okay? So when you're dealing with any kind of infection or cold and you just feel run down, this is a really good tea to have, not just for women, okay? So let me look what else she writes here in this book. So she writes, raspberry improves the muscle tone of the uterus and lining. So as I mentioned to you, considered a tonic at any stage of the woman's life. It facilitates childbirth and recuperation after pregnancy. It tones the skin, gut, mouth, gums, and possibly the prostate. Interesting. And it helps with a stench diarrhea and vaginal discharge. Interesting. I do know that there are tonic waters that are made with raspberry leaf, and that is to assist the skin to be nicely toned and used externally. All right, so what else? Oh yes, so here it says that back in the day, when we kicked the Tea Party in Boston, Tea Party, right? And we didn't have tea from the Great Britain anymore. So we used red raspberry leaves to be the Liberty tea. It used to be called Liberty tea, even though it was not caffeinated, but it resembled tea very much so. So it often was used as the Liberty tea. I think it's a cool piece of history right there. All right, so this tincture is going to be made with 100 proof vodka. Okay, so when I am making fresh plant material tinctures, I like to use 100 proof vodka, which means that this vodka contains 50% water and 50% alcohol. So it's gonna do its extraction that is water soluble and alcohol soluble. So that is very important. All right. So I am gonna be filling up my little container that I have here almost to the top. And I'm gonna cover everything with vodka. So this book that I am sharing with you talks about that if you're using making a tincture with fresh, that she recommends using a ratio of 1 to 2 with 95% alcohol. So for my case, it's 100 proof vodka, and she talks about a little bit different. So, but again, I am using folk methods that I'm not measuring. I am just filling up my container, and I'm going to be filling it up with alcohol, okay, with vodka. My grandfather and my grandmother, they come from a family of healers, okay? And drinking alcohol was completely forbidden in their family. They used alcohol to make medicines, okay? So unfortunately, the stereotype of a Russian household, there is a lot of drinking going on, and there's a lot of truth to that. But in my family, there was no drinking because, like I said, the alcohol was used only to make medicine, okay? That's what it was used for. All right, friends, I think I am pretty much filled up. I'm just pushing it down a little bit. Well, let me add a couple of more. And I'm gonna be topping everything off with alcohol. Topping it off with alcohol, I have already a label on the jar because, trust me, once it's gonna start doing its thing, the color will change and you're gonna forget what's in it. So I have a little label already put on when it was made and when it's good to be strained. Because right now I'm gonna fill up everything. Hopefully I have enough here. If not, I have to go back in the house and get more. Look at that, it's gonna be just enough. So everything is nicely covered. So now I'm gonna cover that, and I'm gonna store it in a cupboard, in the closet, in a shelf, away from the sunlight. Okay, away from heat, away from the sunlight. And every day I'm gonna be turning it upside down a couple of times to make sure that everything is covered by alcohol. So it's gonna sit there for about 6 to 8 weeks, and then at the end of this maceration process, I am going to put it over a strainer with some cheesecloth, and I'm going to strain everything, and I'm going to squeeze the cheesecloth that everything comes out of that. You know, the more sophisticated herbal shops, they actually have a special press that they use to squeeze everything out of these leaves, okay? So after I squeeze everything, strain everything, I'm going to store it in a dark amber bottle with a dropper, because tinctures, alcohol-based tinctures, are used in dropper sizes. So the amount that is usually being used, I shy from recommending those because it sounds like a dosage, where in fact it shouldn't be. It should be the amount that your body requires. So always start with a small amount, and you can increase to your desired effect. So I'm gonna use this for my personal use. 1 dropper full, 3-4 times a day, okay? And if I need to, I can increase the amount, all right? So that's one part of red raspberry leaves. Next thing I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be preparing this for tea. And tea is the most magnificent and amazing tea. So let me show you what I'm going to be doing. The tea is going to be fermented, and it's going to take 2 days to make it. So step number 1, we collected them, make sure everything nice and clean and dry. And I'm going to take a plastic bag. I wish I had some food grade plastic bags, but I don't have any. So I'm going to just take this all and put it all in a bag. Just like this. Stems and all. Everything's going to go in a bag. Just like this, okay? And I'm going to put it all in a bag. And this bag I'm going to be putting in the freezer overnight. If you have seen my video about how I make stinging nettle tea, it's the same process. It's the same process, okay? So here's everything is in the bag, okay? Everything's in the bag. I'm gonna close this bag up, make sure there's no air left in it. Okay. I'm gonna get most of this air out, hopefully I can, okay? And I'm gonna put it in the freezer overnight. And then tomorrow, I will show you what I'm gonna do with it tomorrow. Because this tea, my friends, is gonna be fermented tea, all right? So this is going in the freezer right now. Okay, this bag has been sitting in the freezer for at least 10 to 12 hours. And look how beautiful these little leaves, they're all frozen. Because they're so cold, I'm going to put gloves on, so it just will be easier for me to work with, because this is a fun method of fermenting leaves. And this is how I do it. And there are different methods out there, but this is how I do it. So first step, I harvest them on a clean place, dry weather, and I put them in a bag just like this, and I put them in a freezer overnight or several hours. And now I need to work with them by kind of like massaging them. So the reason why I like to put them in the freezer first, because it helps me to do this. See, they become very brittle, and I'm literally massaging them and breaking them. And that breaks the cellular structure and allows the enzymes to kind of pop out and be available, okay? And this is a very important step in the fermentation process of my leaves. Of course, you can just take the regular leaves straight from the bush, you know, early in the spring. The spring is better time, but you heard my story, you know why I couldn't do it in the spring. I had a local forest deer coming and eating all my leaves. But anyway, so, and now I'm just massaging them because that releases its juice a little bit. It breaks the leaves like this, okay? It's very easy to break them now, because if they were fresh or wilted, you would have a very hard time to do that, okay? But freezing them, it really speeds up the process, okay? So I'm gonna continue working with all of them. See how they crunch up? Literally, you hear that crunch. And this is going to make that fermented taste and smell. And trust, it's not the fermented sour like you're thinking. Instead, the opposite is going to really bring out the aroma of raspberry. And the color of tea will be so deep and rich in color and aroma. It's going to be great for the tea. So this is what I do with most of my non-aromatic leaves, such as what am I doing this with? Blackberry leaves. You can do this with strawberry leaves. You can do this with stinging nettle, and I have done a video with the stinging nettle just like this. So I can put up a link for you guys to look at. And stinging nettle is so good for allergies. So I just published a video about goldenrod and how I preserve goldenrod. And goldenrod is often mixed with stinging nettle in the formula to fight against allergies. All right, so this is gonna take me a minute just to keep working on all of these leaves. And it was such a big pile, it's gonna be resulting in a tiny little pile at the end. So preserve more than you think, because in the middle of the winter, when it's cold and snowing outside, it's just something so soothing to make that cup of tea with home preserved leaves of raspberry. Oh, it's so good. All right, so everything is nicely mushed. And now all of a sudden we have just a small little pile. And now it's going to ferment. So I'm gonna leave it right here in this bowl. I'm gonna put a small plate over like this, okay? And I like to put some sort of weight. And I have a liter or a quart of water. And I'm gonna just throw a towel just to make sure that bugs don't get in or whatever. And it's gonna sit on my kitchen counter for the next 24 hours. If this was hot weather, like hot summer or hot spring, then 12 hours is enough. But right now it's gonna cool, so 24 hours on my counter. Okay, 24 hours later, let's take a look what is inside. I'm gonna take the weight off, take my little, it has a very earthy, nice aroma. It changed color to a little darker, okay, and smells very nicely. All right, so now it's the time to put it for drying, okay? So I have here a dehydrating tray, and it has this thin, I think it's like, I don't know, silicone, I'm guessing, mesh that covers up this so the air flows nicely. So what I'm gonna do is just, I'm gonna break this up so it's not all in clumps, okay? And I'm gonna lay them all out on a trays, and I'm gonna put it in my dehydrator. All right, so what is the, if we don't have a dehydrator, the other best option is to put it in the oven. So I would take a cookie sheet, cover with a parchment paper, and again, spread this out so nothing is clumped up, okay? Break up the pieces if you can, what's clumped up, and let this dry. In the oven, I would do the lowest setting possible, and I would even have the door slightly open so that moisture can escape. And keep an eye on it, because you don't want to cook them to brown bits. You just want them to be dehydrated until they're completely crisp. But in my case, I have a wonderful dehydrator with multiple layers of trays that I can put. And I have a setting for herbs, which is the lowest setting. How many hours? Well, you know, it's you have to go and check on them, okay? Because sometimes it's a little faster, sometimes it's a little slower. In my case, I feel, because they're very moist, because they were fermenting, I think it's gonna take probably about 14 hours. So after 14 hours, I will check to see how they are, because they have to be completely crisp before you can store them, all right? And how to store them? Well, let me just show you an example. Let me put this aside. I just dehydrated a bunch of goldenrod. This is goldenrod. And so what I'm going to do is, I have a clean, dry jar. I'm gonna use some sort of a funnel, okay? And I'm gonna put everything into this dry jar. And I'm gonna make sure that it's stored in dark place, away from the sunlight, because remember, the sunlight likes to break things down, to break the cellular structure too fast, all right? And I'm gonna store it in a dark place, probably most likely in my apothecary closet, where I keep all my herbs on a shelf. Okay, I'm gonna put a label on it so I will know exactly what's in here and what year I have collected it. And from this point on, I can use as little or as much as I want to. And with this dried herb, I can make tea or make infusions. So some people ask me, what is the difference between tea and an infusion? And the tea is just, you know, it's literally a tea bag, you know, the said excuse for tea. But an infusion is something that's a little stronger. So let me show you how I would be making. So infusions can be made and like literally for hours it's sitting there and steeping. But the quick infusion is like, let me show you how I'm gonna do it. So I have here a cup and some sort of a tea strainer. So I'm gonna put that inside the cup. I'm gonna put a healthy pinch of my herb. If you're measuring, that's probably close to a tablespoon, okay? And I have just boiled some water. I'm going to pour boiling water over that. Okay. I have a small plate, little saucer, and I'm just gonna cover. I'm going to cover and let it sit and steep for the next 15-20 minutes. And to remain the heat, I'm even gonna throw a towel over this, just like this, and let it sit and do its thing. And I'll come back to it in 15-20 minutes. All right, and that's how I make my infusion tea when it's not just for pleasure, for fun to have a cup of tea, but for medicinal use, okay? So that's how I make my infusion teas at home when somebody's not feeling well, or to support some sort of a function, physiological function in the body, okay? So I have a couple of trays here that I'm going to fill up with my beautiful red raspberry leaf. All right, so after it's dry, you can leave them in these big chunks, or you may break up even in smaller ones. I remember some of my herbal friends put them in food processor to kind of break them up, or you can cut them with scissors, cut them with a knife. You can put it in a coffee grinder, anything you want to break up these big chunks, because you really don't need big pieces like this, okay? It's easier to make tea with smaller pieces, but you don't have to turn it into dust. You don't have to pulverize it until it's in dust. Honestly, you can leave them in chunks as well. It's really your personal preference, all right? It's just when you leave them in chunks like this, it usually takes up too much space in your storage container. But if you break them up in smaller pieces, right, then more can fit into your storage container. So this is how I ferment my red raspberries for infusion teas, for my medicinal teas, okay? And I hope you guys are also encouraged to go out, find wild, especially if you can find wild, those are even better than the domesticated red raspberry, and make some good medicinal dried tea, because most of them when you buy at the store are not fermented, okay? And the ones you buy at the store from in a tea bag, you have no idea how long ago it was made, and you have no idea how long it's been sitting on a shelf at some warehouse or whatever before it was packaged and sold. So it's probably all the medicinal constituents already gone and left the herb. So make it yourself. You know exactly what's in it, okay? So I hope you guys are encouraged and try something new.